Welcome to the deep dive. You've shared some really fascinating sources, and, well, our job is to dig through them and pull out the key insights for you.
Yeah, the ones that really stick.
Exactly. And today, we're embarking on quite a journey. A philosophical adventure, really.
Right, all the way from the ancient Greeks, right up to existentialism. It's a big span.
Huge span. And we've got some great sources to guide us.
We do. We're looking at excerpts covering the foundations in ancient Greek philosophy, Kant's massive critique of pure reason, Sartre's being and nothingness materials.
Plus some helpful overviews like Wikipedia on existentialism and a YouTube transcript that hits some highlights on key philosophers.
So quite a mix.
Our mission then is to sort of map out these core ideas about reality, knowledge, ethics, basically what it means to be human across these different times and thinkers.
We're hunting for those aha moments, trying to get the big picture without getting totally bogged down in the details.
Definitely want to avoid the overwhelm. Okay, ready to dive into ancient Greece.
Let's do it. Kicking things off with Parmenides.
Yeah, Parmenides, he sets up this really stark choice, doesn't he? These two paths.
Right, the path of truth versus the path of error. And the core idea for truth is being what is.
And error tries to deal with what? Non-being, what is not.
Exactly, what is and what is not. And Parmenides basically says, you can't actually think or speak coherently about what isn't. It's like a logical dead end.
Because even thinking about nothing requires you to treat it as a something in your mind.
Sort of, yeah. He famously claims thinking and being are the same. If you can truly think it, it must, in some sense, be.
Okay, and that leads to some pretty wild conclusions, right, about change.
Oh, definitely. If non-being is impossible, then change, which involves something coming from non-being into being, or vice versa. Well, that becomes illusory.
So the world we see changing all the time, that's not the real story according to him.
Not the deepest truth, no. He argues reason is our guide here, not our senses, which can be misleading.
Fascinating. Reason over senses. Okay, moving on. Anaxagoras, he had a different starting point for the cosmos.
Totally different. He imagined this initial state where everything was in everything, like an infinitely divisible cosmic smoothie where nothing was distinct.
Wow, okay. Everything just mixed together infinitely.
Yeah.
So how did we get, well, this, order, separation?
That's where mind comes in. Nous, he called it. This mind, or intellect, was unique. It was unmixed with everything else.
Why unmixed?
Because, he reasoned, if it were mixed in, how could it control or order everything else? So this unmixed mind initiated the motion and separation that ordered the cosmos.
But later thinkers like Plato and Aristotle, they had some issues with this mind idea, didn't they?
They did. They respected the idea of introducing mind, but felt Anaxagoras didn't really use it properly.
How so?
Well, Plato, through Socrates and the Phaedo, was disappointed. Anaxagoras didn't explain why mind arranged things for the best, it just started the motion.
I see.
And Aristotle kind of agreed, suggesting it was a bit like a Dominus ex machina, a convenient fix pulled out when needed, but not a fully integrated principle.
Like hitting the cosmic start button, but not explaining the program.
Something like that, yeah. Still, a major step to introduce mind as a causal force.
Definitely. Okay, next up. Democritus and the atomists. This feels incredibly modern in some ways.
It really does. Building on earlier ideas, Democritus proposed that reality is fundamentally composed of atoms, tiny, indivisible particles.
Indivisible, right? And they're moving around.
Constantly moving through an infinite void, an empty space. That void was crucial, It had to exist to allow for movement and combination.
Otherwise, they'd just be stuck.
Yeah.
And these atoms weren't all the same.
Nope. Infinite variety in shape and size, round, hooked, jagged, you name it, and their shapes determine how they combined.
So things we see are just temporary clusters of atoms that happen to fit together.
Basically, yeah. They collide, lock together if their shapes are compatible, and stay that way until some larger force breaks them apart.
And the formation of whole worlds. Was that just random bumping?
The initial formation, seemed to be driven by chance collisions, but once a world was formed, things within it happened by necessity.
So like causal laws taking over after the initial random setup.
Exactly. Chance and necessity working together. It's pretty remarkable for ancient thought.
It really is. Okay, shifting gears now to Socrates. He wasn't so focused on atoms and void, was he?
Not at all. Socrates brings the focus squarely onto human life ethics, morality. His big question was, how should we live?
The good life.
The best life possible. And for him, that meant developing moral virtues, justice, courage, wisdom.
And he strongly believed that wisdom, or knowledge, was the root of all virtue, right? If you know what's good, you'll do what's good.
Precisely. Ignorance was the problem. Virtue comes through acquiring knowledge. And his method for getting there? Well, that was the Elenchos.
The Socratic method, relentless questioning.
Designed to expose inconsistencies in people's beliefs, show them what they didn't know, and hopefully guide them towards understanding.
Which didn't make him the most popular guy in Athens.
Definitely not. Constantly showing people they were wrong, it led to resentment. Accusations flew impiety, corrupting the youth.
The sources mention Lycon, Anytus, Miletus as accusers.
Yeah, and Plato even hints in the Meno that Anytus had a personal beef with Socrates because of his philosophical poking and prodding.
So his dedication to this method, to seeking truth as he saw it, ultimately cost him dearly.
It did. Now his student, Plato, took Socratic ideas but launched them into much more abstract territory with his theory of forms. This is huge.
Absolutely central to Western philosophy. But it's tricky to know exactly what Plato himself thought because he wrote dialogues.
Right. That dialogue format makes it a bit slippery. But the theory of forms is generally seen as his major contribution. The basic idea is that the physical world we perceive isn't the real world.
Okay, so what is?
There's another realm, an intelligible realm, populated by perfect, eternal, unchanging forms. These are like the ideal blueprints for everything in our world.
So like there's a perfect treeness form, and every physical tree is just an imperfect copy or shadow of that.
Exactly. These forms are immaterial, they give being to the physical things. And crucially, Plato thought true knowledge could only be about these unchanging forms, not the messy, changing physical world.
Because the physical world is always in flux.
Right. The forms provide the stability needed for certainty. They're like pure concepts that unify all the individual examples we see.
And he used some amazing analogies to explain this. The allegory of the cave. Everyone knows that one.
It's powerful. The prisoners mistaking shadows for reality, that's us, stuck with just our senses. Escaping the cave is like education, the difficult climb towards knowledge of the forms.
With the form of the good being the ultimate illumination, like the sun outside the cave.
Exactly. It's the source of all reality and intelligibility. And he also had the divided line analogy.
Right, mapping out levels of understanding.
Yeah, from the lowest level, imagination dealing with shadows and images, up through belief about physical objects, then thought, like mathematical reasoning, and finally, the highest level, noesis, direct intellectual grasp of the forms themselves.
And the philosopher is the one striving for that top level.
That's the goal. Guided by reason, which Plato saw as the highest part of the soul.
Speaking of the soul, he had that tripartite model, 3 parts.
He did. Reason, logos, spirit or courage, thumos, and appetite or desire, epithumia. He argued they were distinct because they could conflict, like reason knows something is bad, but appetite still wants it.
The principle of contradiction showing their separate faculties.
Right. And in a just soul, reason rules, spirit helps enforce reason's decisions, and appetite is kept in check.
And this mirrors his political philosophy in the Republic, doesn't it? The ideal city.
Perfectly. Just as reason should rule the soul, philosopher kings embodying reason should rule the city. You have the guardians, philosophers, the auxiliaries, soldiers representing spirit, and the producers, craftsmen, farmers representing appetite.
A very hierarchical structure. He was pretty convinced that without philosophers in charge, cities were doomed to be corrupt.
Deeply convinced, though his own attempts to advise a ruler in Sicily, well, they didn't really work out.
Yeah, history didn't quite cooperate there.
And even Plato knew his ideal city wasn't permanent. He predicted its eventual decay due to internal strife and natural processes, a kind of tragic element built in.
A reminder of human limitations, even in the ideal. Okay, Plato's student, Aristotle. Similar, but different.
Very much so. Aristotle was Plato's student for years, but he definitely forged his own path. Less focus on a separate realm of forms, more on the world we actually experience.
So how did he see the soul compared to Plato?
For Aristotle, the soul isn't some separate thing trapped in a body. It's the form or actuality of the body, the very principle that makes a living thing alive and functioning plants included.
So form and matter, body and soul, are intrinsically linked.
Yes, inseparable in living beings. The soul is the cause of the body's life and activities, its source of motion, its purpose, telos, and its essence.
And sensation. How did that work for him?
He described it as receiving the form of the sensible object without its matter. His analogy was wax taking the imprint of a signet ring, you get the pattern, not the gold or stone itself.
That's a great analogy. And mind, nous, for Aristotle.
Like Anaxagoras, he saw mind as special, unmixed. Its job is to grasp the intelligible forms of things, again, without their matter. Thinking, for Aristotle, is the mind becoming, in a way, isomorphic with what it thinks. It is the activity of thinking.
Interesting. He also talked about friendship, which seems a bit different.
It connects to his ethics, his view of the good life, eudaimonia. Friendship is essential for flourishing. He famously identified 3 types.
Right, based on utility, pleasure.
And the highest form, based on shared virtue or excellence. That's the most stable and meaningful kind, involving shared activities, mutual goodwill, and essentially living together intellectually and morally.
Okay, back to the big metaphysical questions. His metaphysics, or first philosophy, what was that about?
That's his investigation into the most fundamental aspects of reality, being as being. What does it mean for anything to exist? He sought the first causes, ITI, and first principles, archai, of everything.
The ultimate foundations of knowledge.
Exactly. These first principles are indemonstrable. They're the starting points you can't prove, but upon which everything else rests. Wisdom, for Aristotle, is knowing these first principles and causes.
And his idea of form, different from Plato's, right? Because it's in the thing.
Yes, form is the essence, the what it is to be that thing, and it's always found embodied in matter in individual substances. You don't find treeness floating around separately, you find it in this particular tree.
And this all leads up to his concept of the unmoved mover, or God.
Right. To explain motion and change in the universe, he posited a first mover. This being is pure actuality, no potential for change. It's eternally thinking.
Thinking about what?
About thought itself, thought thinking thought. It causes motion not by pushing things, but by being the ultimate object of desire or aspiration for everything else in the cosmos. Everything is striving towards its perfection.
Wow, a very philosophical conception of God. Okay, moving into the Hellenistic period after Aristotle, we get schools like Epicureanism. What's their focus?
Epicurus and his followers shift focus significantly towards achieving peace of mind in this life. They were thoroughgoing materialists.
Back to atoms.
Yep. Everything, including the soul, is made of atoms moving in the void. But they added a twist to Democritus's view.
Which was?
The swerve. They proposed that atoms could occasionally swerve randomly, unpredictably. This little bit of chance was crucial for them to allow for free will, breaking strict determinism.
Interesting. And their ethical goal was pleasure, hedon.
Yes, but it's often misunderstood. The ultimate goal was ataraxia, tranquility, freedom from disturbance. The primary pleasure wasn't wild indulgence, but the absence of pain, physical and mental, and fear.
So a calm, stable state is the highest pleasure.
Exactly. They actually recommended a simple life. Luxury is best enjoyed, they thought, by those who need it least. Reason plays a key role in achieving this peace, by helping us discard false beliefs like fear of death or the gods that cause unnecessary pain.
Rationality in service of tranquility.
Got it.
Now, Stoicism. Also aiming for tranquility, but a very different path.
Very different emphasis, yes. Stoicism urges us to understand what's truly in our control and what isn't. Epictetus's handbook lays this out clearly.
What's in our control? Our judgments, desires, opinions.
Right. Our inner world, basically. What's not in our control? Our body, possessions, reputation, external events.
So the key is to focus intensely on managing our inner world, our responses, and accept what we can't control.
Precisely. Don't get attached to things outside your control. Don't desire what you might not get, or be averse to what might happen anyway, like illness or death. True harm isn't external pain. It's harming your own character, your reason, by reacting badly. True good is living virtuously in accordance with reason and nature.
But this could lead to suppressing emotions, couldn't it? The source mentioned a critique about that.
Yes, the potential criticism is that it demands an almost inhuman detachment. That famous example of thinking of your child as just a human being when you kiss them, it highlights that potential for emotional suppression in favor of pure rationality.
Tough ideal.
Yeah.
Okay, last ancient school for now. Skepticism. They question everything.
Pretty much. Skeptics challenge the very possibility of attaining certain knowledge. Their goal, like the others, was often tranquility, ataraxia, but achieved by suspending judgment. Epichoc. If you don't hold firm beliefs, you won't be disturbed when they turn out wrong or are challenged.
2 main types mentioned, academic and Pyrrhonian.
Right. Academic skepticism, linked to Arcesilaus, was largely a reaction against Stoic certainty, especially about sense perception. They argued you could never be sure a sense impression was true because a false but indistinguishable one was always possible. So, suspend judgment.
Always doubt. And Pyrrhonian skepticism. Even more extreme.
Yeah, Pyrrho apparently took it very far, emphasizing profound indifference. They aimed to refute all dogmas, even the claim nothing can be known, because that itself is a kind of dogma. They clung to indeterminacy.
Which does raise the question, how do you actually live day to day with that level of doubt about everything? Yeah. Can you function?
That's the perennial question for radical skepticism, isn't it? Its practical viability.
Definitely. So, wrapping up this whirlwind tour of ancient thought, what's the big takeaway?
I think it's the incredible power and centrality they gave to reason. Whether it was understanding the cosmos, figuring out ethics, or finding inner peace, reason was seen as the key tool. Their ideas, from physics to psychology, laid a foundation we're still building on or reacting against today.
An amazing legacy. All right, we've covered the ancients. Brace yourself now for a big shift as we move into part 2. The existential turn. This feels like a whole different ball game.
It really is. Existentialism zooms right in on the individual, on the subjective struggle for meaning and authenticity.
In a world that often seems, well, meaningless or absurd.
Exactly. The focus is on your experience, your choices, your freedom, your responsibility in creating a life with purpose. Because there's no pre-packaged purpose handed to you. Think, angst, freedom, choice. Existential crises.
And that famous line from Sartre, existence precedes essence. What does that really boil down to?
It means you're born first. You exist before you have a defined nature or purpose, an essence. Unlike, say, a paper knife, which is designed for a purpose before it's made.
Humans just arrive.
We just arrive. And then, through our choices, our actions, we create who we are. We define our own essence. We aren't born a coward or a hero. We become one by choosing cowardly or heroic actions.
So constant self-creation through choice. Okay. Now, Sartre also talks about facticity. What's that about?
Facticity is basically the sum of the concrete facts about you that you can't just wish away. Your past, your body, your situation, where you were born.
Heidegger called it thrownness.
The things you didn't choose but that are part of your reality. Right. They form the context for your freedom. Authenticity involves acknowledging this facticity and your freedom. Inauthenticity often means denying one or the other.
Like pretending your past doesn't matter, or pretending you have no choice because of your past.
Exactly. Or Sartre's example of the waiter.
Ah, yes, the waiter in bad faith.
Right. He plays the role of waiter too perfectly, almost becoming a caricature. He's denying his freedom to be anything other than this role he's adopted. He's treating his job like an essence he's stuck with, rather than a choice he's making. It's a subtle form of denying freedom.
Which brings us to that core idea, radical freedom. It sounds intense.
It is. Condemned to be free, Sartre says. There's no escaping choice. And with that freedom comes total responsibility.
Total no excuse.
No excuses based on human nature or being overwhelmed by emotion. That feeling of anxiety or dread, the angst, comes from realizing you're totally free and there's nothing external, no God, no universal rules to justify your choices for you. You choose before nothing.
That example of the resistance member under torture. Sartre says even if they break, they chose to break.
That's his stark point. The choice was still theirs, even in that extreme situation. And every choice you make isn't just for you. It's like you're setting a value, legislating for all humanity what you think is right.
Wow. Heavy stuff. This connects to bad faith, or mauvaise foi again, doesn't it? Trying to escape this burden.
Precisely. Bad faith is self-deception. It's lying to yourself to avoid the anguish of freedom and responsibility. Consciousness, for Sartre, has this ability to negate, to see what is but also what is not. Bad faith happens when the liar and the one being lied to are the same person you.
He even takes a shot at Freud's unconscious, suggesting it's a way of avoiding bad faith.
Yeah, he argues that the Freudian censor pushing thoughts into the unconscious must know what it's censoring, which implies a kind of self-deception, a bad faith at the heart of it. He prefers to see it all as choices made in consciousness, even the choice to ignore or deceive oneself.
Like the woman in his example who lets her hand be held but sort of ignores the implications?
Right. Consciously focusing on her intellectual self while allowing the physical situation to develop. Or the waiter's over-the-top sincerity. These are patterns of bad faith, ways we try to pretend we aren't radically free.
Okay, another key Sartrean idea. The look. The regard. What's happening there?
The look is that powerful experience of realizing you're being seen by someone else the other. It doesn't even have to be literal eyes. It could be the rustle of leaves you think might be someone watching.
And what does that realization do to you?
It changes everything. Suddenly, you're not just a pure subject experiencing the world. You become an object in the other's world. Your possibilities feel limited, defined by their gaze. You experience your own transcendence transcended. Your subjectivity is being objectified.
The keyhole example is perfect. Peeking, feeling like the master of the situation, then hearing footsteps.
And bam, shame floods in. You're caught, reduced to someone peeking through a keyhole in the eyes of the other. Your freedom feels drained away.
Existentialism also seems to embrace irrationality, or at least question rationality's dominance.
Sartre, especially, could be quite critical of relying too heavily on rationality. He saw it sometimes as another form of bad faith, trying to impose a neat logical structure on a world that is fundamentally contingent, messy, maybe even absurd.
Trying to rationalize away the anxiety of freedom.
Kind of. Clinging to rationality might stop you from confronting your freedom and finding meaning authentically. Suppressing the dread means you risk being defined by others, by the look.
Which links to Camus and the absurd.
Exactly. For Camus, the absurd isn't just the world being meaningless. It's the clash between our deep human longing for meaning and rationality, and the universe's cold, silent indifference to that longing.
And his response wasn't despair, but rebellion.
Yes, rebel against the absurd by embracing it. Live life passionately, cherish your freedom, revolt against the meaninglessness by creating your own meaning, even knowing the universe doesn't care.
We focused a lot on Sartre and Camus, but who are the other key existentialist figures?
Well, you have to start with Kierkegaard, often called the father of existentialism. Huge emphasis on the individual, subjective truth, authentic living, the leap of faith,
And
definitely a precursor or fellow traveler. Again, subjective experience, creating your own values, the critique of traditional morality, the Übermensch, very existential themes. Heidegger is complex.
Sorrow called him an atheist existentialist, but Heidegger denied it.
Right. But Heidegger's explorations of being, Dasein, thrownness were massively influential on Sartre and others. And then there's Simone de Beauvoir, a crucial figure exploring freedom, choice, responsibility, especially in relation to women's experience.
And this wasn't just academic philosophy, was it? It seeped into culture.
Oh, hugely. Literature, Sartre's own novels like Nausea, Camus is the Stranger, placed by Pirandello, Ennui, films grappling with meaninglessness and choice like Synecdoche, New York, even psychology.
Existential psychotherapy, Viktor Frankl's logotherapy.
Exactly. Trying to help people find meaning in their own lives, confront their freedom and anxieties.
Of course, like any major movement, it faced criticism. People called it pessimistic.
They did. Sartre argued back that it's actually optimistic because it emphasizes human freedom and the power to create value through action. Another criticism was that it led to quietism of despair, like, if nothing matters, why do anything?
But the response is that you create meaning through doing, through engagement.
Right. There were also tricky questions about morality without God, accusations of it being purely subjective.
Though Sartre argued individual choices have universal implications.
Yeah, that was his counter. And of course, critiques from more scientifically minded philosophers like the logical positivists, who found its metaphysical language problematic.
So a really challenging, profound look at individual existence, freedom, and the burden of creating meaning. Okay, part 3. Immanuel Kant. Where does he fit in all this? He feels like a bridge.
That's a great way to put it. Kant's critical philosophy is pivotal. He comes after the early modern rationalists and empiricists, and he's trying to sort out what reason can actually know for certain.
His big work, The Critique of Pure Reason. What was he critiquing?
Reason itself. Pure reason operating independently of experience. He wanted to establish its limits, figure out if metaphysics, as traditionally practiced, was even possible as a science.
He said Hume woke him from his dogmatic slumbers.
Yes. Hume's skepticism about causality and induction really shook Kant, making him question the assumptions of rationalism, which thought reason alone could uncover deep truths about reality.
So the critique aimed to show traditional metaphysics was impossible, but also explain how we can have certain knowledge about the world, like in math and physics, knowledge that's a priori known before experience.
Exactly, that's the tightrope walk. His solution was transcendental idealism.
Okay, break that down.
The core idea is that we don't just passively receive information from the world. Our minds actively structure our experience. Objects conform to our way of knowing them, not the other way around.
So we can only know things as they appear to us, phenomena, not as they are in themselves, noumena.
Precisely. Our minds impose certain structures like space, time, and fundamental concepts, he called the categories, onto the raw data of sensation. This is how we can have synthetic a priori knowledge. knowledge that adds something new, synthetic, but is known universally and necessarily prior to specific experiences, a priori.
Because we're putting that structure there.
Right. Think of it like wearing colored glasses. Everything you see is tinted by the glasses. The glasses are like the structures of our mind, space, time, categories. You can know for sure that everything you experience will have that tint because the glasses guarantee it.
So things like every event has a cause aren't just learned from experience. They're necessary structures of how we must experience the world.
That's Kant's argument. He uses the transcendental deduction to argue that experience wouldn't even be coherent without these unifying concepts, like causality and substance and the underlying unity of the I think that accompanies all our thoughts, the TUAP.
And this is why traditional metaphysics fails, because it tries to use these concepts beyond the realm of possible experience.
Exactly. The categories, like cause, substance, only have meaning when applied to possible objects of experience, phenomena. Trying to use them to prove things about God, the soul, the universe as a whole, noumena, things we can't experience, is like trying to use the colored glasses to see what color things are without the glasses. It's impossible and leads to contradictions, antinomies, he called them.
So, a Copernican revolution, instead of mind conforming to objects, objects must conform to mind structures for us to know them a priori.
That's the famous phrase. We can only know beforehand what we ourselves put into things.
But what about things like freedom, morality? We can't experience freedom directly. Does Kant just dismiss them?
No, and this is crucial. He limits speculative reason, what we can theoretically know, to experience, but he argues that practical reason, reason applied to morality and action, necessarily must go beyond those limits.
How so?
For morality to make sense, we have to presuppose that we are free. If we're just determined causal beings, then ought has no meaning. So, while we can't prove freedom theoretically, we must be able to think it, to assume it for the sake of morality.
So morality gives freedom a kind of reality, even if it's not theoretical knowledge.
It gives it practical reality and a positive value. Morality actually helps by setting limits on speculative reason's claims, clearing a space for practical reason and freedom to operate. He also made that key distinction between analytic judgments, where the predicate is contained in the subject, like bachelors are unmarried, and synthetic judgments, which add new information.
And math and science rely on synthetic a priori judgments, adding new info, but known necessarily.
Yes. And metaphysics wants to be entirely synthetic a priori, but Kant argues it fails because it tries to apply those judgments beyond possible experience.
But he acknowledged that humans just naturally do metaphysics, right?
Right.
We can't help asking those ultimate questions.
Absolutely. He saw it as a natural disposition. The critique's goal wasn't to stamp it out, but to see if it could be put on a secure scientific footing by understanding reason's own limits and capacities. His critique, he believed, secured the possibility of real science within experience while showing why dogmatic metaphysics leads to dead ends and skepticism.
So Kant creates this intricate system, limiting theoretical knowledge to experience, but carving out essential space for morality, freedom, and practical reason. A really complex, influential bridge.
Hugely influential. He really set the stage for a lot of later philosophy, including how people would think about subjectivity, reason, and the limits of human understanding, which certainly echoes into existentialism, even if they took things in very different directions.
Okay, wow. We have covered a massive amount of ground in this deep dive, for the very nature of being and reality in ancient Greece.
Through Kant's intense focus on how we know anything at all and the limits of our reason.
All the way to the existentialist deep dive into individual freedom, responsibility, and the search for meaning in a possibly meaningless universe.
It's fascinating to see the threads, isn't it? How the ancient quest for rational understanding contrasts, maybe connects, with the existential focus on subjective choice. And Kant sitting there trying to referee the whole game of reason.
Absolutely. We hope this journey has given you a clearer map of these incredibly rich philosophical territories. Obviously, each thinker, each school is a world unto itself.
Oh, for sure. If something we touched on sparked your interest, Parmenides' logic, Plato's forms, Aristotle's ethics, Stoic resilience, Kant's structures, Sartre's freedom, definitely dig deeper. There's so much more there.
And maybe just leave you with this thought to chew on. As you go about your day, think about how these ideas, ancient, modern, critical, might still be operating in your own life. How do you think about reality? How much freedom do you feel you have? Where do you find meaning?
Which path, ancient or modern, reason or rebellion, resonates most with you right now, and why? It's a question philosophers have been asking for millennia, and it's always worth asking yourself.